Hello and welcome. If you're leading a nonprofit, you know just how important compliance is. In this explainer, we're going to break down Alabama's specific rules for charitable fundraising registration.
This guided tour is part of our multi-state fundraising compliance series, which we've designed to make these pretty complex regulations simple for folks like you. And a big thank you to our friends at Ironwood Registrations for making this resource possible.
You know, a lot of nonprofits think that once they get that federal tax-exempt status, they're all set. But honestly, that's usually not the whole picture. Many states, and that includes Alabama, have their own set of rules for any organization that's asking for donations.
So, let's dive into the details. We're going to start with who actually needs to register. Then we'll walk through the initial paperwork, take a look at some common exemptions, and wrap up with how to handle those annual renewals to stay in good standing.
First things first, who exactly has to register? Well, in Alabama, all of these fundraising activities are regulated by the Office of the Attorney General, and more specifically, by their Consumer Protection Division.
So here's the bottom line. If your organization asks for contributions from anyone who lives in Alabama, you probably need to register with the state first. And this is true whether your nonprofit is based right there in Alabama or you're operating from a completely different state.
And we're not just talking about going door to door. The state's definition of solicitation is really broad. It covers pretty much all modern fundraising methods, things like direct mail, email campaigns, that Donate Now button on your website, special events, and even when you hire an outside firm to help you with your fundraising.
All right, so you figured out you need to register. What's next? Let's walk through the first steps to get this done.
The process itself is actually pretty straightforward. You'll start by gathering your key organizational documents. Then you submit the official filing to the Attorney General's office. You pay a small fee, and then you're clear to start your fundraising activities in the state.
And the good news here is that the required documents are things your organization probably already has on hand. We're talking about the basics, like your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, your IRS tax-exempt letter, a list of your board and officers, and any contracts you have with professional fundraisers.
And here's a little helpful tidbit for organizations that are based outside of Alabama. You are not required to appoint an in-state registered agent just for this purpose. That definitely simplifies things a bit compared to some other state filings.
Now, it's important to know that not every single organization that fundraises has to register. Alabama offers several exemptions, so let's take a look and see if your nonprofit might qualify for one.
Okay, one of the biggest exemptions is for smaller charities. If your organization doesn't plan on raising more than $25,000 in a given fiscal year, and this part is key, all of your fundraising has to be done by volunteers. If you meet both those conditions, you may be exempt. Alabama also has a pretty long list of other types of exempt organizations. This can include religious organizations with a 501c3, educational institutions like schools, and even some membership groups, fraternal organizations, and volunteer emergency services.
But here is a really critical piece of advice. You can't just assume you're exempt. In nearly every case, you have to actually apply for an exemption with the state and get their official approval. It is definitely not an automatic pass.
Okay, so getting registered is just step one. To keep fundraising legally in Alabama, you have to maintain that registration. So let's talk about the annual renewal and what you need to report.
The renewal cycle is tied directly to your organization's fiscal year. Your renewal paperwork is due 90 days after your fiscal year closes. Now, if you need more time, say you're waiting on your Form 990 to be finalized, you can request an extension for up to 180 days, but you have to ask for it before that original deadline hits.
The most important part of this annual renewal is providing your updated financial info. This is really all about transparency. The state wants to make sure there's accountability to donors by reviewing your financials from your most recently completed fiscal year.
And that brings us to our last section, how to make sure you're staying compliant year after year. Because this isn't a one-and-done task. It's really an ongoing responsibility for any nonprofit that fundraises in Alabama.
Here's a quick checklist to help you stay on track. You want to monitor all your fundraising activities, keep a close eye on those renewal deadlines, and make sure your financial reporting is timely. It's also smart to stay aware of any changes to state laws. And one last pro tip, if you ever decide to stop fundraising in Alabama, make sure you file a formal notice of non-renewal instead of just letting your registration lapse.
So why does all this paperwork even exist? Well, it's really about protecting the public and building trust with donors. These registration rules create transparency and provide oversight, and that ultimately helps legitimate, well-run charities like yours really stand out. Look,
Navigating these rules is a huge part of maintaining your nonprofit's good standing. If you need a hand managing your charitable registrations, whether it's just in Alabama or across multiple states, the specialists at Ironwood Registrations are there to help. You can learn more over at ironwoodregistrations.com.